Mr. President, I believe every member of this Senate and every American understands the very deep debt of gratitude that we owe to the men and women who put their lives on the line to defend this country. That should not be a political issue. It should not be a partisan issue. And I think all of us have been appalled by what we read about in Phoenix and in other locations about people manipulating data, pretending that veterans were getting care in a timely manner when that wasn't the case. It is my strong belief as chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee that every veteran in this country is entitled to high-quality medical care and that they should get that care in a timely manner. I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. We live, as everybody knows, in a politically divided country and a divided Congress. Reaching agreements is not easy and, quite frankly, does not take place very often here in the Senate. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, without casting blame, it just doesn't happen. And the American people understand that and are not happy about that. So reaching a compromise among people who look at the world very differently is not easy. But in this process, Senator John McCain of Arizona and I have tried our best to come forward with an agreement. It's an agreement which I'm sure he is not 100% happy about, and I can fully assure you I am not 100% happy about. I would have written a very, very different bill. And what I want to say now, in thanking Senator Harry Reid for his strong support for this process, Chuck Schumer, Patty Murray, Dick Durbin, pushing this effort forward, I hope that we will be back on the floor to continue the effort to deal with the many unmet needs of veterans. But right now, we have a crisis on our hands, and it's imperative that we deal with that crisis. And to my mind, the essence of the crisis is that we have learned that in many parts of this country, not all parts, but many parts of this country, veterans cannot get the timely care that they need. They cannot walk into a VA and within a reasonable period of time get the treatment that they need. And so this bill, in a significant way, begins to address that important issue. And let me very briefly tell you how it does that. For a start, there are many locations around the country where we need new facilities, we need refurbished facilities, we need expanded facilities. In fact, there are 26 locations in 18 states where that is the case. This legislation would allow the construction of 26 major medical facility leases in 18 states around the country, and I believe that will help us in many parts of the country in providing the quality, timely care that our veterans deserve. Mr. President, in my view, there are areas of the country where we simply do not have the doctors, the nurses, and the other staff that we need to provide the care that our veterans deserve. Many primary care physicians get burned out by working 12, 14 hours a day. They quit. The turnover rate is too high. It is my view that the VA, by and large, and this is echoed by the views of the veterans community themselves in independent studies, that when people get into the VA, the quality of care is good. But I will tell you, if you don't have the primary care physicians, the other physicians, the nurses that you need to treat veterans, they are not going to get the care that they need. This legislation will target $500 million in unobligated balances for the hiring of new VA doctors and nurses. I see that as a significant step forward. Mr. President, one of the great, I think, embarrassments or shocks that all of us feel is that within the military we have seen in recent years horrendous accounts of sexual assault. What this legislation does is say to those women and men who were sexually assaulted in the military that when you get into the VA, there is going to be quality care for your needs. This legislation also touches on a couple of issues that are not directly related to health care but have overwhelming support in the House and in the Senate. We have heard from many young veterans who are in college as a result of the post-9/11 GI Bill, who right now can't afford to go to college because they're not getting in-state tuition. This legislation addresses that issue. I have talked, as I know Senator McCain has, to Gold Star wives. These are the women who have lost their husbands in combat, who I think, for a not sensible reason, are unable to take advantage of the post-9/11 GI Bill. They want to get their lives together. They want to be able to go to college or whatever. This bill addresses that issue. Now, there's another provision which was strongly supported by Senator McCain and other Republican leaders. And and Senator McCain, I'm sure, will go into it at greater length, but essentially what this provision does is says that if you are 40 miles or further away from a VA healthcare facility, a medical center, a CBOC, or whatever it may be, you will be able to go to the doctor of your choice under the strict supervision of the VA. What this will do is prevent people from, in some cases, in very rural areas. I think this is mostly a bill for people in very rural areas who now have to travel long distances to get the health care. This will make their lives easier. This is a 2-year trial project. We will see how it turns out, but that is in the bill as well. Last point that I want to make is I don't think there's any disagreement in the Senate nor among the American people that when you have incompetent people in the VA, or worse, dishonest people in the VA, they should be removed from their jobs immediately, and that the Secretary of the VA should have the power to get rid of them. I don't think there's any debate about that. Where there has been some debate is my view is that those employees deserve due process. And I say that because I don't want to see a situation where a new president comes in and for political reasons fires 400 top executives because they're Democrats or because they're Republicans or whatever. I don't want to see a situation where somebody is fired because she's a woman or black or Hispanic or maybe gay, and maybe really that's the underlying motive, and that person has no course of appeal. So what we have done is developed a very expedited process in terms of dismissal. We say if you are dismissed, you're off the payroll tomorrow, you're gone, but you're going to have a week to file an appeal, and the appropriate body will have 3 weeks to rule on your appeal. And I think that makes sense. I think when you think about it, it does make sense. So, Madam President, there are a few other important provisions. It is important, in my view, for the nation to take advantage of the expertise that's out there in the private sector. How do we develop information technology for people accessing the VA? We want to do that. We have a commission that would help us do that. And we have another presidential commission that will help us with construction, which has been an ongoing problem in the VA. So, Madam President, Mr. President, that is a brief overview of what is in the legislation. Does it solve all of the problems facing our veterans? Absolutely not. Should we come back and continue to deal with this issue? Absolutely. But I think given the crises that we have right now, this is an important step forward. And I want to thank Senator McCain. Senator McCain's views on many issues are not my views. We look at the world differently, but that is what democracy is about. And our job was to sit down and work out the best agreement we did. And I think from day one, Senator McCain showed absolute good faith in this, a desire to reach a compromise. I hope he feels that I did the same, and we are where we are today. So, Mr. President, with that, I would yield the floor to Senator McCain and thank him very much for his efforts.
Senator from Arizona.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to say to the senator from Vermont that I respect a great deal the work that he has done on this legislation. I respect his commitment and his leadership of the Veterans Affairs Committee. I respect the fact that Bernie Sanders is known as a fighter, and it's been a pleasure to do combat with him. But I also would like to say that at the end of the day, with both strongly held views on different aspects of this issue, we were able to come together, I believe, in a way that will help to relieve this terrible tragedy that seems to have befallen our nation's veterans. It started in Phoenix, Arizona, as my colleagues know, but it has spread all over the country. And it begins with the terrible story of perhaps 40 veterans having literally died for lack of care. I don't need to go through all of the different problems that have surfaced in the ensuing days since that began. But there should be no doubt in anyone's mind that we should accept the word of the Inspector General, who said, these are systemic problems. This isn't a scheduling problem. These are systemic problems that need to be addressed. And you know, our hope as we concluded this legislation is that perhaps we could put some of our other differences aside that have beset this body and move forward and address this legislation as quickly as possible and begin to repair the damage, because we have, for all intents and purposes, in some ways betrayed the brave men and women who were willing to go out and sacrifice for the well-being and freedom of the rest of us. So again, I want to say to Senator Sanders, I appreciate his leadership, and I appreciate the fact that we both had to make some very tough compromises. But I've found in my experience that when tough compromises are made, usually that's a sign of bipartisanship and a sign that it's a good piece of legislation. I know that isn't the popular thing to say nowadays in today's political environment, but I don't believe if compromises hadn't been made that we would be bringing to the floor of the Senate and working with the House, as Chairman Jeff Miller over there, that we would be doing what we are introducing today. I'd also like to say a word about two other individuals, and that's Senator Burr, the ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, who I admire enormously. He has worked tirelessly on behalf of the veterans. He is a most respected member of our conference. And of course, our most unique treasure, Dr. Tom Coburn, who had been my nominee to take over the Veterans Administration, which almost destroyed a long and beautiful friendship. But Dr. Coburn is he's the conscience of our conference. He is the person that we look up to and admire the most for his integrity, for his honesty, his intelligence. And I want to thank both Senator Burr and Dr. Coburn for the enormous work. In some ways, I'm sort of the spokesperson when they really did a great majority of the work. As Senator Sanders pointed out, I'd like to just cover several aspects of this legislation and try to explain a little bit why some of these provisions are there. Of course, a top priority for me for many years has been to give the veteran a choice. We ought to give a veteran a choice, the same choice that people who are Medicare recipients, who have TRICARE, that's the military health care program, where if they're outside of 40 miles from the nearest VA facility, if there's a wait time which is unacceptable, then they should be able to go to the health care provider right near their home, not have to get in a van and ride for 2 or 3 hours for a routine medical care. Now, I also want to emphasize what I hope my colleagues understand, that this is no way a comment on the Veterans Administration. I'll leave that to others and other judgments, because there are things done in the Veterans health care system that only the Veterans health care system can handle. PTSD, traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, prostheses, war wounds, that only the VA can do. And none of this that we are saying in any way denigrates or does anything that is uncomplimentary to the outstanding men and women who work in this system. We are proud of their work. It's the system that needs to be fixed. So I don't want anybody who is associated with the Veterans Administration to believe that we are criticizing them. We are talking about a system that must be fixed. It's urgent that it be fixed. Every single day that goes by, a veteran is deprived of the care that he or she has earned serving this country. And that's why I urge my colleagues, if you have amendments, if you think that you can make this bill better, we welcome it. We'd be glad to discuss with you amendments to this legislation. We'd be glad if you know how to make it better. But in the meantime, can we sort of pledge that we are committed to seeing this thing all the way through? I would urge my colleagues to do that. And again, I know I speak for Senator Sanders when I say, you've got a way to make this bill better, this legislation better, come on in. But let's not get hung up on certain other aspects of our differences that have characterized what most people would view as gridlock in this body. So I urge my colleagues to look at this compromise, and it is a compromise, and see if you want to think you can make it better. We welcome your input, but also we would like to have your commitment to seeing this thing through to the President's desk. And I know that over on the other side of the Capitol, they're working hard on this issue too. So we bring up, as I mentioned, veterans should have that card. That veteran should be able to go to the facility of his or her choice. Accountability. Senator Rubio and others, Congressman Miller and others have introduced legislation. Senator Sanders has made it, I think, improved on it. And this calls for immediate firing. And immediate firing if there is evidence of work that is not in keeping with the standards that we expect of our employees. And during that period, under appeal, that person will not receive a salary. But that person will have some due process. 7 days to appeal to the Merit Systems Protection Board, and there are 21 days for that Merit Systems Protection Board to render a final decision. Yes, we should have, as many of our colleagues want, accountability. But that accountability also in this proposal allows for due process for someone to at least hear their case heard. Expedited hearing authority for VA doctors and nurses, and additional authority to hire new providers. Now, there is unobligated funds out there, and we are going to use unobligated funds to hire more doctors and nurses where they are needed. But I'd also point out, in some cases, doctors and nurses have to work harder where they are. Also, there are now pending, over the years, administration requests for 26 major facility leases to be entered into. Now, this has been the President's request. This has been a bipartisan agreement on the need for these facilities, and I believe that we should proceed with it. And I would also point out to my colleagues, this legislation has some expenses, but the major expense is to move forward with the construction of these major medical facilities all over America. And in the view of all, it is necessary. This improves the access to health care for individuals who are the victims of military sexual assault. Sexual assault is probably one of the most vexing issues that we face in the military today outside of combat. We don't know exactly what causes some of this. We do know that many times it is because of a lack of discipline. But there's no doubt that this is a problem in the military that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, mothers and fathers will be not agreeable, in fact, reluctant to have their sons and daughters serve in the military unless we address this issue of sexual assaults. And there are many efforts going on. in the defense authorization bill, within the military, many other areas where we're working on this issue. But I think this provision of the bill will be very helpful in attempting to address that issue. A commission that needs to be appointed on scheduling and care. We know one of the problems is scheduling, and this whole issue of phantom lists and waiting lists that disappeared and all that is, we've got to get to the bottom of it, and I think the smartest people in America could help us on that, and another commission on capital planning. What our needs are, veterans. One of the things we do know that we have an aging veteran population from World War II, those that are, God bless them, that are still with us, Korea and Vietnam. That is an aging veterans population and requires a different kind of care than those of Iraq and Afghanistan. And be frank, a lot of that is geriatric care. To be frank, geriatric care is very expensive. But we've got to understand who this population is and what their needs are, just as we have to understand the Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans and what their needs are. And very frankly, our planning so far has not been very impressive to me. We need to have this is a pure Senator Sanders initiative, a GI Bill, tuition eligibility for surviving spouses of those who die in the line of duty. It seems to me that's only fair. And a provision also that in-state tuition will be provided for all veterans at public colleges and universities. Now, again, finally, I want to say thank you to Senator Sanders. And I also want to ask my colleagues again, this is not a perfect document. We are ready, I think, to see any changes that we would consider and perhaps germane amendments. But I would also hope that we could focus our attention on the bill and the efforts we need to help our veterans as opposed to other issues which seem to be with us on a daily basis. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President, I would just want to
Senator from Vermont.
I just want to thank Senator McCain again, and I think that his remarks were right on in terms of describing what is in this legislation, and I support his appeal. Look, everybody has an issue, and every time a bill comes up, I have my pet concerns, and I can bring forth amendments. Senator McCain has his. But what we are appealing to right now is if you have a way to improve this bill for our veterans, bring forth that amendment. But please, please do not bring forward extraneous amendments. Let's focus on the needs of veterans. Let's not make them political footballs. And I hope very much we can proceed in that direction. Thank you, Madam President.